Okay.
So thank you very much. Today is Thursday, August 23rd, 2012, and this is Rhonda Williams, Director of the Social Justice Institute with Brandon King, who's a videographer, here to do an interview, joint interview with you all today for the Voicing Action Project. Why don't we start by you all saying your names?
My name is Theresa Letson.
I'm Ndeda Letson.
Okay. And you are long-term residents of East Cleveland?
Yes, I've been living here since 1967.
Okay.
Yeah.
So why don't we start with the first question, which is tell me about yourself and your family, your tenure here in East Cleveland.
Well, my mother and I, um, with my stepfather, moved here in 1967, just before I graduated from high school. And she always just liked the area, so this is where she wanted to live. So we stayed in East Cleveland. We lived at several residences since we've been here.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how old were you when you moved to East Cleveland?
I was 17, just before I graduated from high school, and I did not go to any East Cleveland schools. When we moved, I was a senior at John Hayes, so I really didn't want to leave my friends, and I wanted to graduate from the school that I had been going to all those years, and so she allowed me to do that.
Okay. And what did you think of East Cleveland when you first moved?
Well, as a teenager, it was, you don't have a thought in your head. So I mean, it was okay. It was just another place to live. We as a child, I remember my mother always moving, trying to find a better place to stay, and each time it was a better place. You know, the houses got better. Um, I grew up with my mother and my grandfather and my aunt. We all lived in the same building when we lived in Cleveland. And when she decided she wanted to live on, basically on her own, away from the family, then she started moving to, like, we lived up and down Cedar. We moved to 93rd. We lived on East 100. We lived on East 108th. And East 108th was the last street that I remember living on in Cleveland. That's when she decided she wanted to live in East Cleveland, and we moved to a two-family. No, we moved to an apartment building on Hayden Avenue. It was real nice, and since we
Was that Woolworth, Mom?
no, it was on. Oh yeah, we lived on Woodworth too, but um, that was after we lived on Hayden, and they were both nice places. I mean, she just wanted to live in East Cleveland.
Tell me a little bit about where you lived before. You mentioned several addresses and what it was like
Yeah.
growing up in those areas.
Well, I can remember from an early age. We lived on Carnegie, and I remember the address very clearly. It was 8110 Carnegie, which is now Vienna Sausage. I think that's where it was, and it was just really, growing up at that time was easy. I mean, she let me roam. You know, I would wind up over on Cedar to play with some of my friends, you know, as long as I got back home. And at that time, parents would get out in the backyard and they would call their kids, Teresa, you know, and you could hear it, and you'd come home. And that area was full of a lot of kids. It was a lot of apartment buildings. And the apartment that we lived in, it had, I don't know if that was set up to be a rooming um, suite or what, but the front there was a bedroom, then there was another bedroom, and then there was like a living room, and it was all off of one hallway, and then you go through double doors, which was a pantry, and then another set of double doors, which was the kitchen, then the back door, and off the kitchen was a back room. So it was enough for all of us to stay in there. Um, it was an extended, we always lived in an extended family situation when I was a little girl, with my grandfather. I never knew my grandmother because she died when my mother was 15. And I just had fun. I went to Bolton Elementary School. Um, And then once she started moving, then I went to Harry Davis Junior High, and I went to Rawlings first, but then I went to Harry Davis Junior High, and then John Hay, and I was there for my full term. And but it was, I felt safer then than I do now. I mean, the children now, it seems as though they're not totally safe. Crime is different, it's bolder, I would say. Not that it didn't happen back then, but now it happens more and bolder. I mean, people seem not to have a heart, if a criminal can have one. You know, they just are out there. So running back and forth from Carnegie to Cedar, 79 Quincy. I mean, I remember when my mother taught me how to go to the library on 79th and I think it was Quincy. She walked me the first time, and then she said, "No, you're going to have to walk from now on by yourself." And I just felt comfortable at doing that. And I think probably the first time she let me go by myself, she might have been behind me. But then after that, that achievement of getting down there and going to the library and getting a book, bringing it back home, I was very comfortable in being safe. Don't talk to strangers, that's what she would say. You know, that's all she had to say to me. I didn't have to catch a bus, I walked. And now that I think about it, that's a long walk. It's a long walk. And I also walked back and forth to school until I got into junior high. Then I had to take a bus. I had to carry all my books. We didn't have book bags back then. And they gave every child their books for every class that you had. So you had to struggle and carry all that stuff on the bus. And when I was in high school, I was in the band and the orchestra, and why I chose French horn, I do not know. I had to carry the books and the French horn home every single day that I was in that class. But I did it. I mean, the bus driver would watch my horn while I sat, but it was an experience. And once I graduated, I still lived with my mother. At that time, I think we moved from Hayden to Woodward, and then I went to Jane Addams School of Nursing for licensed practical nursing. Got my diploma and certificate, and I trained at Huron Road Hospital, and I was there for 3 years. It's another East Cleveland place, and then I got married, and I had my daughter, and I quit after 3 years because I wanted to stay home with her for a while. Then I got this year.
So before we get to Ndeda's birth, bring Ndeda into the world here, into the conversation. You were going to school, junior high and high school in the 60s. Well,
Yes.
Elementary, junior, and high school, 50s and 60s. And
Yes.
that was a fairly tumultuous time in different areas, in
Yeah.
terms of schools, in terms of
Yeah.
activism. Do you remember any of that? What was it like?
I
both
do
in terms of
remember
schools
some
and
of
in terms
that.
activism?
I remember my mother keeping me home because they were boycotting. She said, "You're not going to school." I was a senior too, and I wanted to, I didn't want to miss school. And she said, "No, you're not going to school." And I can't remember what the boycott was about. She didn't play an active role in any of that, but she supported it, by keeping me home. And I remember seeing Army cars driving up and down Cedar, and they didn't stop or anything, but you knew their presence was there. And then I remember when Martin Luther King was killed, and there were riots in Huff. It's a very sad time. Yeah, and then when Bobby Kennedy was, I remember when Bobby Kennedy was killed, and um, we, as a senior, or close to being a senior, we wanted to go downtown, and some of the kids did leave school to show their support. I didn't go, but yeah, those times were very heartfelt, very sad. Um, I do getting off the subject a little bit. I remember when John F. Kennedy was killed, and I went from one class to another. I think I was in junior high, and I sat down at the desk, and there were tears on my desk. And then when they let us go, I was so overwhelmed. But by the time I got home, got off the bus, and we lived upstairs in this one particular building on East 108. I mean, I just kind of bawled. My mother was crying. Everybody was upset during that time about that because they felt he was a good president. So yeah, those times were something.
Were you involved in any of the activism that was taking place in the city
No,
around civil rights?
no, no, no. I wasn't. I wasn't involved in any of that because at one point I can remember looking at the TV. We had a TV, and I was actually too young at that time to be involved in anything. But I was looking at the news, and they still show that film every now and then, where down south they were hosing people who were demonstrating, and it hurt so bad. I just cried because I could see that it was mean and it was hurtful, and these people were, they were peacefully demonstrating, and they were being hosed down, and dogs were being um, um, sicked on them, and it was just awful. And they had it on the news. They showed that stuff on the news. So yeah, I was kind of young.
What impact did the civil rights movement or Black Power struggles have on you at all? I mean, if not in the moment, did it have any impact in terms of how you moved through your life later?
Yeah, I think it did because there was one point where they had this, oh gosh, I can't remember what the name of the program was, but a lot of jobs came out. Gosh, I can't think of the name of the terminology now, where they wanted a lot of black people to get jobs. And there was this thing called not workman's comp, oh gosh, manpower. I think that's what it was, called manpower. And people were getting scholarships, they were getting into jobs. And I think it was easier for the youth to get into colleges. I wanted to go to college, but at that time my mother could not afford it. And so that's how I got into Jane Addams. And I think I applied at one of the manpower places, and the lady asked me, what do you want to do? I remember asking, I said, well, I want to be a nurse. She said, well, you could be a doctor if you want to, because she was trying to encourage me to go to school. But at that time, I had no knowledge of scholarships and things like that. I did not take the SAT. I didn't take the ACT. And so I told her, I just want to work. I want to be an LPN. So she enabled me to go for an interview, fill out applications and stuff like that, and I got accepted into that program. And it was 1 year, and I knew I'd have a job, and I'd be working, making money.
So you had Ndeda in the early 70s.
70, yeah.
1970. And at that point you had moved from Hayden to Woodward.
Yeah, we moved from Hayden to Woodward, and then moved from Woodward to Strathmore. We lived a lot of places in East Cleveland. So when I got married, we were living on Strathmore. And then we moved from Strathmore to Taylor, my husband and I. and that's when I got pregnant with Ndeda. Um, and once she was born, we moved to Noble in a two-family house. And early on in the marriage, we were separated and divorced. And I lived on my own. I was a single parent with her. Moved from Strathmore, from Noble to Coit Road, and I lived on Coit for her early years of education.
So what was it like? Hayden was the first street you moved on.
That I can remember,
That you
yeah,
can remember.
yeah.
What was that like? What was Hayden like?
It
What
was.
were your neighbors?
It's nothing. It was nothing like it is now. It was very clean. We lived in an apartment. And that apartment building still looks nice. It's still painted red, I think. And there was a two-family house right next door to it, and so, well, maybe it was a single family, but I knew it was only one family that lived in that house. And I befriended the girl that lived there. She was a student at Shaw, and we always talked. We befriended each other, and in the summertime, we spent a lot of time together. But yeah, it was very clean, very quiet. I remember seeing, it was an apartment building that was across the street from us, and there were these twin ladies that lived there. And to this day, I still see them every now and then in the stores, but I don't think they live there anymore. I've never introduced myself. I didn't know them then, but to see them at a later age reminded me of where I lived on Hayden.
Was it a predominantly African American community?
It was
White mix?
it was diverse, but it was more black people. Yeah. Yeah.
So Ndeda, what are your earliest memories of East Cleveland growing up?
I could never rest during the summertime because Mom always kept me active. I was in tap dance, ballet, modern dance, piano, day camp, skating. You remember skating together at the Civic Center? Remember we go there during the summertime?
Then I did it. I did it for you.
And I appreciate it.
Yeah, I did it for you because I did have experience in skating when I was younger at this place called the Playmore. It was on Cedar.
There was no sleeping in for me in the summertime. None.
Yeah, that's true. Single parent, young girl. Yeah, I had to keep her busy. That was what you do.
That was my youngest memory. I had a really good childhood, and listening to her story, you could see why. When my youngest memory is also is the extension of our extended family, continuation of our extended family. So, Mom, when she was working labor and delivery at night time, she would drop me off at my auntie's house on Woodworth. And she has a daughter, and Zandra is a couple years older than myself, so she was like my sister. So only child by my mom, Zandra is my sister, and I'd see her every day. And I'd see her every day, and we grew up together. We went to different schools up until, did we ever get to Shaw together?
Yeah, our last year you were there.
Yeah.
I think you were there during her last year before she graduated.
You can see she's also part of my memory, too. Let's see. I enjoyed school. I had good grades most of the time when I wasn't procrastinating. What were my favorite subjects?
She had excellent grades all the time. And I was very determined when I saw that she really enjoyed school. And during her second grade year, they had this special program in East Cleveland called
Oh, yeah.
Focus Scope, and they chose a few kids out of each one of the elementary schools to attend this school, which it was at St. Philomena on Euclid in East Cleveland, and they utilized that building as a school, which was next door to the church. It was all kind of connected, and her teachers saw that she had that initiative and drive, and so she was one of the chosen ones, I should say. And she went to that school until she graduated from the 6th grade to go into what's the name of the
Kirk.
Kirk Middle School at the time. Yeah, so she's always been very motivated about education, and I'm just very proud of her for that. It's got her where she is now.
When I was at Focus, Grandma lived on Terrace, so sometimes when, so my mom would drop me off at night when my auntie was still alive. She would drop me off at night, and I'd spend the night with my auntie, and then she'd pick me up in the morning. She would take me to school. I always saw my mother every night and every morning. When I was old enough to walk to school, and my grandmother lived nearby, after school, she would either drop me off at Grandma's house, and I'd walk to Scope Focus on Euclid from Terrace.
Terrace and Lee Road.
Terrace
Yeah,
Lee
'cause
Road,
it's like,
across from Grand Pepe
yeah,
Hill.
once you got down to Euclid, it was like maybe a block or two.
Yeah.
So it was easy for you to get
And
to.
my best friend lived over there too, so that
Yeah.
was a fun part. Those are fun memories. I had my first chicken nugget at that McDonald's
Yeah, I
there.
didn't know that.
That's right. I remember that. I just thought about that. I'm so
Yeah, she was sneaky too. She was very smart. She knew how to do it.
strategic.
I'm still finding out things.
I was strategic. It's
Yes,
called
very
strategery.
Yeah, you were very.
That's
strategic.
right. And I'm happy to see that McDonald's is still there. It was always nice then, and it's nice. It's very nice now. Very well kept. What else do I remember? Help me out with questions. I went to Kirk.
Wow, that's a big sigh.
I'm just trying to recall some memories. You know, I remember orchestra at Kirk. I remember being first introduced to golf while I was at Kirk, and how much I resisted it, and how much Mom says, you need to learn how to play this game. So I have hay fever. I don't like to come out and help you with the grass, so why would I go out and play golf all day or something like that? And I remember I also thought that I didn't see people like me playing it, so I felt uncomfortable being introduced to that game. I also recall someone who's now a sorority sister of mine, her mom, who was a teacher there, introduced her to that game, and she became darn good at it. She may have gotten a scholarship from it too. I remember that. I remember playing clarinet while I was at Kirk. I wasn't really good, but it kept me, active, and all of my friends were involved in that. I also remember we moved here during my last year at Scope Focus, 6th grade, when I was entering Kirk, and that's when I met my best friend, who's still in best friends to this day. Her mom still stays on the street, about 6 houses down.
Were you active? I think you were active in athletics too, weren't you? In Kirk, or did that happen in Shaw? Were you in a track at the?
Yeah. I wasn't fast. I always had great upper body strength. I played basketball, but I couldn't. My hand coordination and running, that just didn't work. I was used more as a defensive player. And I loved science while I was there. And I think at that time is when I really thought that I would go into the medical field, because I really enjoyed science and always being exposed to medical terminology. Grandma was a medical professional. Mom was a medical professional. I know I sensed Mom was sort of encouraging me in that direction. So I went from, ooh, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a nurse. I can't see myself cutting on anybody.
Yeah, yeah, you did say that. She did say that. She said, nah, I don't think I want to be in the medical profession. But I didn't really want to encourage her into that. I just wanted her to find something that she would really want to do. But my focus on her was to go to college because I wanted her to have what I didn't have. And I knew that college was that way to get her to her goals. And so I was very, very adamant about it. And when she got into Shaw, I actually had to talk to one of her counselors. I went to her very focused and I said, I know there are programs out there. My daughter is smart. What can you get her into? She is going to college. And I think that's when,
Upper bound.
yeah. So I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
But yeah.
She sees my memory, so that's good. You're absolutely right. I got into Upper Bound on the Case campus, so it was very science and math oriented. So of course I was very much exposed to medical profession and did a great deal of traveling to different colleges. Went to so many of the HBCUs. Really loved that exposure. Was actually accepted to Francis Bolton Payne Bolton School of Nursing, full ride. But my, what was it, 11th bridge year, junior year, college. Remember I told you, so there were these invisible lines on the college campus that you should never go across as a student during the summertime. And so we were just being adventurous. And we migrated onto the south side of the campus up at Delbert. And let's just say I saw some things that just really discouraged me from continuing on that line. So I immediately switched my aspirations, and I did my final summer at Baldwin-Wallace. And that was more business focused, and I actually fell in love with history. I hated history in high school. History became more of a sort of like soap opera to me. But I also ended up at Baldwin-Wallace because first of all, the HBCU, if I could do it again, I probably would have gone to a historically black college. Probably would have.
She wouldn't have got as much money as she did from Baldwin-Wallace, and I think that
was a deciding factor.
It was a deciding factor with me encouraging her, and then I think also it was close to home. But yeah, we wanted her to go to a historically black college, but they just wasn't giving as much money.
I also rationalized in my mind that I needed other exposure. Different exposure to different people, and I wanted to get to know people who didn't look like me. And I felt that part of my exploration, I could achieve that far enough away from home, but close enough away, close. I could just jump on the red line and I could be back.
Yeah, do you remember the first day you achieved that diversity?
No.
I remember that very clearly. We had moved her out there. And I remember her telling me she asked this one girl, where was the water fountain? Well, the girl was white. And I think you said they laughed at you. They wouldn't tell. They just laughed at her because she asked, where was the water fountain? So I think it hurt her feelings because she connected all of that water fountain, white, black, that was an experience for you, but you blocked that out of your memory.
I don't remember that.
I'll never forget that. But
wow, I don't remember that.
I remember it because it upset her. She really upset her. She cried that evening about that because I think she thought that she was going to be all accepted because it was a diverse school, and the parent student assemblies were very encouraging as far as that was concerned. You know, that it's a diverse school. I forget what the percentages of white to black were, and so she was just gun ho at that. But then that first day, it was like
That's
a
my bubble.
snap back to reality. We accept you, but just so far, you know. But she was like very focused on education, very focused. I mean, she, yeah,
So that was your senior year of college? What year
that
of
was
college?
that was her freshman.
Very freshman year of college. So when you were on Case's campus,
While I was at Upper Bound.
Upward Bound, you were a junior in high school.
Yeah.
Okay. And you said you ventured to a part of the campus that they said was those invisible lines.
Mhm.
Can you explain that a little bit more? And what did you see that made you shift?
Oh, well,
Experience?
the radius that we had as students on the campus during the summertime were just that in terms of boundaries to keep us safe, and not safe from wow, the more I think about it, perhaps those were part of the boundaries too. But the boundaries that we crossed were just, I just went over across the Delbert into that quad and in one of the engineering or medical science, life science buildings, and I saw a cadaver. We actually just went into the classroom and, pulled back the sheet, and I said, I cannot see myself cutting on this, to get through med school, and so that there it be. But we stayed on north in the North Village, and there were some imaginary lines over there too. And just looking back now, I didn't understand what some of the makeup of that was about. It was from our perspective, it was, Ms. Reeves said, don't go over there, or we're going to kick you out of the program. And I was enjoying, the enrichment that I was receiving. So I didn't think about, well, what's over there that could harm me, or who lives there, or who's going to church there, or people look like me. So what's the problem? But perhaps that was some of the makeup of those invisible lines as well. I mean, I wasn't aware of it.
When you say perhaps that was, what's the that?
Well,
What are you seeing as the makeup of that?
well, having worked in University Circle, and you know what, I really want to, we'll circle back to a thought I just had I want to talk about, but having worked in University Circle and also seeing and experiencing different messages about the sanctity of this place and how beautiful it is, and how it's such a fabulous jewel and oasis within Northeast Ohio and the city of Cleveland. We want to protect it, and in order to do that, there are institutionally over the years have been build up boundaries. And along the fringes of these boundaries has been disinvestment, whether it's been conscious or a symptom of unintentional neglect. But just hearing some people who haven't a full conscious of what that area means and what the neighborhood surrounding them mean to Cleveland, and some of the histories behind that. I've heard people saying, don't go under the bridge, don't go cross Wade Park, it's unsafe, it's nothing but drugs and prostitution, and bad people live over there. And what bridge? The bridge that is actually in Cleveland, but it's called the East Cleveland Bridge, and it's a very poor misnomer. It's actually at Coltman, or 123rd. Coltman. Yeah. It's actually at Coltman where the Service and Operations Police Department is located.
Oh, okay.
And, you know, I sense that because there also was a great deal of civil unrest and rioting, that also for some good reasons, people were basically saying, you know, we're not wanted over there, so don't go over there. But yet there's an institution that needs to thrive, and it thrives not only by educating people who live here and has a respect and sensitivity for those memories, but people are shipped in, you know, and mom and dad want their children to feel safe when they leave. And I suspect that when I was on Cases campus, even during my upper bound period during those summers, I probably had some of that cover over me and wasn't aware of it.
So when you were on Cases campus and Upward Bound as a junior,
Mm-hmm.
did people tell you don't go under the bridge, which for you meant going home?
Oh, you really want to go there, huh?
Well, I mean, is that the area where Little Italy and all of that is, kind of on the fringe?
That's one way to get to Little
get-
Italy.
yeah,
Little
okay.
Italy.
Okay. Now I know what you're talking about.
I'm assuming the bridge, let me be clear, I'm assuming the bridge that you're talking about is the bridge that divides Case Western Reserve University Circle, what's considered University Circle.
And East
now,
Cleveland.
From East Cleveland.
From East Cleveland.
Right.
But East Cleveland was your home.
So don't go home. Just sort of, you know, get into one of those fly pods and zip there. You know, I honestly, I can't say that someone never told me not to go home. I can say that there were boundaries drawn to keep us within and keep us safe. Looking back, you know, sure, from a different perspective, because East Cleveland is home, it is saying don't go home.
Did that make you feel, how did that make you feel? Did you feel any particular way when people said or intimated that you should not go or venture beyond the bridge into East Cleveland because it was not safe, when that was a place you were traveling from and going to school in?
I always felt like that. I always felt like people who said that didn't know, don't know East Cleveland. They didn't know me. They didn't know my family, nor they know my friends. They didn't know where I lived. They didn't know where I went to school, where I went to church, where I grew up. They didn't know, and so ignorance.
Is that how you felt in the moment? What were the emotions you had in the moment? And how did that affect or impact you?
Wow, I mean, that's years ago. I can't. Different. You know, because of my upbringing, I've never felt lesser than. I've always felt strong walking into a room. But for that one experience Mom is reminding me of, I've blocked it out. I've never felt less than anyone else. I've noticed difference between myself and other people who didn't look like me. But I never felt as if anyone's better than me. So in that moment, Dr. Rhonda, when they said don't cross that line, from my perspective at that time, honestly, it was probably, okay, well, they're just, you know, don't want us venturing off campus. I'm not going to give that moment any more non-credibility than what it was, because it was just, you know, I was a child, So
she was getting a campus experience
yeah.
pre-college
Mm-hmm.
with a bunch of other kids. So, but
It was somebody else's rules probably for me at that time.
What was the cohort of students you were with in Upward Bound?
Can we take a pause here? Just to, and as a point of clarity, the bridge, the first street after the bridge, go up into Little Italy, still Cleveland. Then you go to the service police station, University Circle. Then the next street goes right back up into Little Italy, and then you hit the cemetery. East Cleveland doesn't start till midway.
It doesn't start until Lakeview. Let's
I
call
thought
it.
there's a sign that
Let's
the
call it.
cemetery.
Yeah, but let's call it Lakeview,
Okay.
which is if you draw a distance between Mayfield at the intersection of Ford Mayfield and Euclid to Lakeview, it's over a mile. It's over a mile away. So let's just half that. It's at least a half a mile to a mile beyond the bridge, where you're still with a half a mile beyond the bridge going east on Euclid, that you're still in the city of Cleveland.
It's just,
So what does you wanted to talk a little bit more about some of your earliest memories and maybe some of your fondest memories too of East Cleveland?
Sure. So, I've always, although I've had that experience living on Case's campus as a junior, until I became an adult, really didn't associate East Cleveland distinct from University Circle, because I actually grew up there. Mom worked labor and delivery for my earliest memories.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't uncommon for me to go to work with her at night, ride the Greenie bus. Remember the Greenie bus? The buses used to be green.
That would take me to my to the
Yeah.
buildings. Yeah.
And sometimes I think you had a girlfriend that worked there at night sometimes. She would either take me, you would either take me to work at night or take me to
Yeah.
work in the morning. And
That
either
was
way,
Shirley.
we would ride the Greenie bus.
Yeah.
So that was my early childhood. I was always in the circle. And then I lived there during my high school years. I actually fell in love down there too. Remember, when I was I was a very fit woman, very fit. After high school and basketball and track and all of that, I just kept running. And so I met this football player.
That's right.
And we would run around the lagoon. So it was all it. Your earlier comment, I guess the reason why it's hard. It was hard for me to associate someone telling me not to go home, is because I think I've always felt like I was, even though it was a very different neighborhood. But it was always, for me, there wasn't East Cleveland University Circle. It was more over there, over here. I wanted to talk about that a little bit. So I'm sorry, you had some other questions.
Yeah, no. I mean, did you want to expound a little bit more on that?
I know that I've always been drawn to that area. So after Baldwin Wallace, I didn't know what I wanted to do. Really had no idea. I just knew that I had to work because that's what Mom said. So I said, you can figure it out, but you have to work. So I worked at a consumer finance company. And
you jumping ahead now, because when you were in Baldwin Wallace, I had a
oh yeah,
loan.
let me tell the story.
Okay.
So I don't know why was I home, but for any reason, I was home one day, and these two gentlemen come, and I tell the story basically like this. you told them I would give you this loan, but you need to give my daughter an internship. And that's the story that I'm sticking to. And they loved it. So their office was in Middleburg Heights, which is just down the street from Baldwin Wallace, Berea. And I just made up an internship. I think it was, process redesign of their lead generation systems. I don't know, whatever, how, creative we can be when we're trying to get through school and paid for it at the same time. So, it was worthwhile work, and I learned a great deal. And I went from intern to a sales associate, which was basically someone who was more admin / receptionist, took payments as people came in and answered phone calls. And I began to learn the business. And when I graduated, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And basically they offered me a full-time position. Well, I worked that job for a while. Helped me get my first car that I bought. It's red. It's a red pony. I call it Scout. I have a very fond memory of that. And, I would go all around the city and also outside of the city, all across Cuyahoga County, and sometimes outside of Cuyahoga County. And the turning point for me to go back to school to continue to pursue my education was when, I called the lead. It sounded like it was an elderly person over the phone. She wanted a loan, a home equity loan. She said she believed her house was X. I drove up to her home, and I clearly, in my heart and in my mind, did not believe the house was worth X. And I finished my visit with her, came back to the office, and I explained to my colleagues that, I didn't think it was going to fly. I didn't think there was value there. It's not something worth pursuing. And so this was also at a time when financial instruments were becoming very, very exotic. And a number of our branches, they were just imploding because people would just walk down to the county, grab a fistful of leads, we call them leads, which are basically new filings, mortgage filings, and all they needed was a briefcase and a telephone, and they were in business. They became mortgage brokers. They were in business. And so there were pressures for our offices to continue to generate within that climate. And that didn't matter to me. What mattered to me was, here's this woman who's obviously, from my observation, she was living on very, very limited means. The neighborhood was not, there was a great deal of deterioration. Her home did not appear to be at a value by observation what she believed it to be. And so I wasn't going to do it. I wasn't going to continue on with it. And I think I told Mom, I said, Mom, I'm going back to school and I know what I want to do. I'm on the wrong side of the business. I got to get closer to solving these type of problems because, what I'm doing right now is not helping people. It's too late. And so then I actually just quit my job, and I started exploring some programs at Levin College. And at first I thought I wanted to do a joint program, JD MPA. And then for me, the MPA piece, it wasn't technical enough. I already went through, a BA in history. I needed some meat and potatoes at this point. I said, I know how to think, I know about framework, but I need to know how to do something. So although I was accepted to the MPA program, I opted to torture myself and do 2 years instead of 1. And immediately, I just saw Frances Hunter. I remember she would always say, we're just planting the seeds and watching them grow, planting the seeds and watching them grow. And she was a counselor, and she would help students find internships. And I had, it's so funny, Man, I had dinner with her earlier this week. I didn't even put the two together. But nonetheless, the empowerment zones were starting at this time across the country, and Cleveland had a designation as well. And she says, well, and they hired me. And I would drive scout all across these 6 to 8 neighborhoods, trying to find properties to acquire for renovation purposes. But as I look back now, we weren't acquiring fast enough. There may have been some socio-political things at play, whereas the means, not necessarily of this particular organization, but there wasn't as much involvement of African American brokers in the whole buying and selling and building up these neighborhoods. But they had a whole lot of listings, but not many of them were calling me back. And so after a while, my mentor at the time, who was also my supervisor, said, you know, I think you've learned just about all that we can teach you here. Why don't you start looking for something else? What do you want to do? And he says, because, you know, once you've seen a house built, you know, once you've transacted a deal, you could just take that anywhere. And I said, well, I started looking at, you know, this, that, and the other. Talked to Fran, and I went into a similar role, but with a new industrial development corporation. And that was fine. I also learned about brownfields and the new buzzword at the time, which is now a part of current curriculum, is, from my perspective, a new buzzword at the time was environmental injustice. And like, well, why are all these factories, why are all the black people living around all these factories, you know, that are no longer there, and the land is dirty, and it's, you know, it's weeds, the chain link fence are rotted, and things of that nature. And but with this particular organization, the goal was to begin acquiring those, to do mass assemblages, package them, market them for redevelopment, and utilizing the VAT program to help clean them up, to make them more marketable. Voluntary action, something, oh goodness. I'm into the alphabet soup of things. But nonetheless, brownfields. Oh, well, land or property that is contaminated by something. I mean, a brownfield could be a site of a former gas station or cleaners, or, you know, some place that made coating, and those substances weren't disposed properly, and they leached into the ground and into the soils, and can cause harm to people, like radiation. Yeah.
So you were involved in helping to acquire properties, to assemble them?
Yeah.
Redevelopment, were they also involved in cleaning them up, or disassembling them?
Well, this organization wanted to be involved in cleaning them up, but it was more of a resource finder than anything else. Yeah. And then I guess after that, went back to talk to Fran. I said, well, you know, Fran, I think I've learned everything I'm going to learn there. She says, well, why don't you go talk to so-and-so? And so-and-so was this small, well, it was a real estate firm, boutique real estate firm, and it's downtown. Like, oh, never really thought much about downtown, except for when we would go downtown with Auntie to was now East 4th, and she would, you know, buy her wares, wigs and things like that. But so I interviewed with them. I had absolutely no idea what they did, but it all sounded interesting and I knew I could do it. And they must thought that, you know, I could learn fast. And they hired me as an intern. And by the time I graduated from college, I had a job walking out across the stage. Yeah. And by the time I actually came on board full time, that firm was acquired by a global consulting firm. So I had, I always talk about this, I had this public sector nonprofit degree background and training, and I went immediately into corporate America, but I was consulting to nonprofit organizations that were in need of real estate transactional type services, but I had never walked in their shoes, but yet I was telling them, you know, here's what is probably in your best interest and things of that nature. I had built up a great deal of, build a nice network of people who taught me a lot, who exposed me to a lot of things. I felt like I really grew a great deal. I had a lot of opportunities to travel, so I saw a lot of the country. But after the tragedy of 9/11, business began to sort of retract a bit or contract, and I left in the fourth or fifth round of layoffs, and I thought I left with that industry's name on my chest, but I actually left out with my nerve. So I started a small firm called Minerva, and the clients that I had were nonprofit organizations surrounding University Circle. Somehow in my heart I always knew I wanted to go back there. That's where I wanted to be, and I wanted the neighborhood surrounding them to begin to look like and feel like them, to feel more a part of home.
So let's discuss how the city changed over time in East Cleveland.
Okay.
And I think that'll bring us back full circle to some of the work you've been engaged in, Ndeda.
Okay.
And so Mom, can you begin to describe how the city changed over time, from the time you moved to East Cleveland to now, and what those changes look like?
It's funny. Before we moved into East Cleveland to me as a youth was like some foreign city, because we would. I think I told you before, around Christmas time, we would drive down Euclid, like we were driving, just to see the lights, but it felt like we were driving into another state. It was always very quiet, very clean, and we wanted to see how things looked up here. And I think that was the draw for my mother. She wanted to live in a very suburban kind of city. And so growing up, getting older after we moved here, I could see some of the things that were going down, like in the Hayden area. It just got depressed looking around those neighborhoods. I never could understand why people can't pick their trash up, or what happens to those areas, that they begin to look not clean, and people are living there. But I never wanted to leave East Cleveland. I always wanted to. My mother wanted to, because she was still working. She never drove. She doesn't know how to drive, and so she wanted to live close to a bus line, and that's how we wound up getting this house. And I thought it was a nice area, and when we moved here, there were just a few white families here, but they were older, but there was a police officer who was white. He lived adjacent across the street, but they were moving out as we were moving in. finally realized that. And it was only a couple of white people here, but they were married to, related to someone who was black. And all of a sudden, I mean, you just see that it's changed. It's different.
And why do you think that was?
Like, I can give a little example, like South Euclid. A lot, that area is very diverse right now, but I can see it changing by when I was working and the schools would let out, I'd see more black kids than I would see white. That neighborhood is changing, although it's still very, very nice, it's still very diverse, but it just seems like white people are moving away from the areas that black people desire to live in. They want to be a part of that community. I mean, they really want to be a part of that community, but because they don't stay, then the neighborhoods change. And it's very difficult to understand why that happens, as the way East Cleveland did. I mean, it just, I don't know. I have no answers for that.
Did you see a diminishing of resources for the community when the neighborhoods began to change?
Well, when I moved here on Noble, which Noble Business District is actually Cleveland Heights. So on one side of Noble is Cleveland Heights. On the east side of Noble is East Cleveland. I think this is the last street of East Cleveland that's around Nela Park. There were a lot of different businesses. There was a drugstore. There was a fish market. It was, the businesses were diverse. There was cleaners. I think, I'm not sure if it was a cleaners, but there was a shoe repair. Now when you go down this street towards Euclid, walking north on Noble, it's mostly hair salons. There's no more drugstore. There's no more fish market. That fish market moved over into Euclid. Those were like conveniences that I enjoyed at one time. So those owners, they moved away. I mean, my groomer, she was on Noble. And they just kept breaking into her place. And I think they even robbed her at one point. She just couldn't stay. So she moved to South Euclid. You know, those things happen when an area changed. And it kind of pushes people away. Maybe they wanted to go. And maybe they didn't. Like, I don't think she really wanted to leave. She's white. I think she wanted to stay, but she just kept getting, she was fearful. She said she put a steel door on in the back, and they still broke in there. So that was one change that I noticed in my area here.
What did the change look like for you, Ndeda, or how did things begin to change, or did you notice change in the city?
Well, I'd have to go way back to some of the earliest memories. When my aunts lived on Woolworth, I remember when she moved there, my cousin and I were still very young, and we would play into the very night up and down Woolworth and around Hayden and then back. And you're right, she'd come outside and, Ndeda. We would come home.
That's old school calling.
And we would come
no
home.
Cell phones.
There was a gas station that was at the corner of the street at Hayden and Woolworth, and it was active, or at least as an active service station when we moved there. She moved there. But I remember playing afternoon, and it was the first time I saw, what are those things called? Bollards, steel poles that are cordoning off a site or vacant property to keep people from driving their cars up. And we were running through, and it's all graveled at this time. I guess maybe the tanks were taken up. And I trip and fall, and pulls me up, and I'm reaching for this needle, this hypodermic needle on the ground, and she's like my big sister. She said, "Oh no, don't touch that, don't touch that." She knew what it was. I had no idea what that was. And I guess because of her reaction, it just frightened me. And so that's like one of my earliest memories of things changing around us. There was a person who, Auntie would let us go across the street, play with Tiki and the kids across the street. And there was this gentleman, single gentleman, lived upstairs, and he would often feed the kids in the neighborhood. So we loved going over there to get some, dinner. And I remember a couple summers that he would do that, and we really enjoyed his company. And I remember visiting with my auntie, and she says he was killed yesterday. Someone broke into his home and killed him. And I'm like, what? As a young kid, I wasn't, I was more saddened by the loss of his company than really understanding, that's a treacherous crime. What's going on here? I also remember there used to be was it a Bob Evans? There was a Bob Evans in East Cleveland.
Yeah, it was down on Euclid, not too far from Noble and Euclid.
Yeah.
Going east.
And I tell you, this is how, and perhaps some families still do this. They befriend people in the neighborhood, and people watch other folks' kids, and you have to be concerned. So there was a person who lived in my aunt's neighborhood. I don't know why I think because we befriended her daughter, we would just hang out with her. And after a while, we just started spending the night over her house. And she worked at Bob Evans, so we would, in the morning, sometimes go to her work with her, and she would feed us there. And I just remember, that was no longer an option after a while because it closed.
It closed, yeah. That was another reason why I liked it here too, because it was open when we moved here.
Yeah.
It's nice.
Around how old were you when all this was happening?
I was still in elementary school. I was very young. I probably was I think I was maybe fifth grade.
I was going to say you had to be in focus scope.
Yeah.
Thing.
Yeah, I was, because I only went to Prospect one year. And Christ the King 1 year.
Yeah.
I also remember that everyone didn't look exactly like me when I was a kid here. We had there were some white students in my class. Few. I could tell that they were like the only ones of them.
In high school?
No.
In Shaw?
No. This is in elementary.
This, talking about Shaw, her Shaw experience. Did you realize it?
Maybe I haven't got to that yet.
Well, you bypassed.
Well, she said the earliest memory. We go on like this.
Ahead.
But we're talking about changes. So Hayden, there was a custard shop we would walk to, closed. There was a homemade ice cream shop next to the historic Standard Oil Rockefeller site was that Chapman on Euclid. Not only is it closed, the building is no longer there. I remember when there were barbecue joints that you would want to go to eat at on Hayden. There was also a bowling alley in that same neighborhood where I never got to go there. I don't think I was ever old enough, but it was still open when I was a very young.
Memory, where was it?
Remember Chapman? Perhaps Grandma lived when she lived on Strathmore, we sometimes we would go to an ice cream shop. It was an ice cream parlor. Some
But
neighborhoods still have.
that was on Coit down the street from where we live.
No, ma'am.
No?
No. This was on Euclid,
On
several
Euclid?
blocks away. Remember, Heroes is still there. Car dealerships, active car dealerships.
I don't know why I can't
Across the
remember
street
that.
from Shrimp Boat, Lee
Oh,
Road.
Lee Road. Yeah.
Now think across the street.
Yeah.
Okay, it was
Yeah.
a row of
It was a
retail.
small strip mall that had
Yeah.
all these retail places, like, and then there was there was an ice cream parlor right on the end of that.
I mean, a real ice cream
A
parlor.
real ice cream parlor. Yeah.
Wow.
Mm.
I also remember when,
It's
Friday
funny how you had
night.
to say shrimp boat for me to remember that.
yeah, we didn't eat at the Shrimp Boat, but
Well, after a while we didn't, but I liked going there and earlier when you were much younger.
there were a lot of, we didn't have to leave the area to go out to eat, to be entertained. I also remember when Auntie was well, and this is my grandmother's sister who raised us, Auntie. We would walk 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, we would walk down Hayden in the dark through the back way of the transit station, hop on a bus, and go across town to her girlfriend's house. The environment felt safe enough for her to do that with two small kids. I suppose that a combination of her becoming ill and it no longer being the environment feeling safe enough for us to do that is why we stopped. We would go to Dean Doan's, Fat Malls, and Thelma's blues parties. Friday nights we would.
Yeah, they playing cards and stuff like that.
And that was fun, but that changed. Yeah, I also remember sometimes. I also remember while the majority of the summers my mom was able to keep me active in programs, whether it was some type of extracurricular activities. I also remember I think I became familiar with Reaganomics. Massive, one summer, they're plentiful. Kids were at day camps. We were at the Civic Center skating, learning all types of dance, tap, modern, ballet. There was a lot of that. And then the next summer there was relatively any. And I remember Mom saying to me, and she wasn't, and I don't think I wasn't old enough to really understand that a lot of what she got me into was also supported through federal programs, block grant dollars and all of that. She just basically said, Mom, can't afford it. We just can't do this. We're going to have to find something else to do.
But then, as you got older, once you got into high school, the programs were there. The basketball, the volleyball, the softball. I mean, you were in all, I kept making sure she was in all that. But then she liked sports, so it wasn't an issue.
I also stopped liking. I have
Yeah,
two different stories. I was a musician. I wasn't really great, but I liked playing in the band, in the orchestra. I loved performing. But I remember it no longer was available for us at school. It's like we had these instruments and we couldn't play them because there wasn't a teacher there to instruct us. There were budget cuts. I remember budget cuts. I think perhaps if I had more consistency and exposure to that, maybe I would have had more fortitude when I got to high school to continue. I really wish I continued playing. But the story I tell is, you know, the boys weren't looking at the girls in the band. They were looking at the girls on the volleyball court. So, you know, I started playing
It's
volleyball.
funny how she remembers it totally different. I remember forcing her to be in ballet, forcing her to take piano lessons because at that time they had this thing called, oh gosh, where they would have two people sitting on the piano and they would each be learning. I forget the Yaka.
Yeah, I didn't like
Anyway,
the person that I
she
was
said,
playing
yeah,
with.
the person that she was playing with would push her off the piano, so she didn't like playing piano. But now she'll say, "I wish I had continued it," because I even bought you a keyboard
Yeah.
to play. But you know, when they don't like something, they're out of it. But I would make her finish what I paid for, so she had the exposure. You don't remember that?
Yes, I do.
You remember it that way?
Yes, I remember
Okay,
it that
I'm
way
glad.
too.
I'm glad.
There's multiple sides to a story. I remember all of them. I just wasn't going to tell that side.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right.
But anyway, sports became her thing.
I loved sports.
Yeah, she really did.
I wasn't that great at it.
No, you were great at volleyball. You weren't great at what
basketball.
you wanted to be.
I really
She
wanted to be a good
wanted
basketball player.
Yeah, but you had problems with your knees, and so that kind of.
Well, the story that I tell is, Coach put me on the floor as a defensive player. So my job was to take everybody else out their game. Wasn't to shoot, wasn't to score points. I think my all-career high was maybe 3 points. And actually, that was on videotape. We were at Warrensville. I think I made a 3-point shot, running down the court. At least I remember it that way.
Yeah, I was.
That's right.
I was a bench mom. I mean, I went to every single game she ever went to, even if I was the only one sitting at a away game doing the chants. You remember that? I went to every game.
Yeah, you were really good at that, right?
Mm-hmm. I also, when she was in elementary school, I also stayed on her first day of every grade. I was there all day. Do you remember that?
Yeah, you'd bring cupcakes.
But I don't know why I did it. I think because I worked nights at the time and I had the opportunity. When that first day of each grade, I would be there and they would let me sit. I wouldn't do anything.
So,
We were going back and forth.
I know. We have more happy thoughts, as you can see. We're conscious of things that were changing around us, but we have happy memories living here. And so that's what's the dominant topic for us. Yeah.
What do you think contributed to the changes that you talked about?
Which ones?
The custard shop closed, the ice cream shop closed, the barbecue joints closed, the bowling alley is gone, the active car dealerships no longer exist. Safety becomes more of a problem. What do you think contributed to those changes?
Population loss, disinvestment. I don't believe that we ever lived on a street where there was a block club.
Did you give it much thought at the time when you just noticed things closing and changing? Did you give much thought at the time to what is going on and why is this happening?
I don't think at an early age I thought about what's going on, but I knew things were becoming different. I didn't ask why. I suppose that I didn't know to ask why.
And you know what? It's funny. Remember when you mentioned Shrimp Boat in that little strip mall, and right in that area were all of those apartment buildings. It just all of a sudden there was nobody living there, or either they were vacant buildings, or it just I couldn't wrap my head around that. Because in some of those buildings, I wanted to live in some of those apartment buildings. When I was much younger and she was a little girl, I mean, I thought they were very nice. And it just seems like all those people are, I don't know if they, I don't understand what happened with the landlord situation. I don't know what happened with all of that. Those little pockets, areas where it became desolate, even towards the apartment buildings close to Taylor and Euclid, between Taylor and Euclid and Noble
Sure.
and Euclid. All of that changed.
How has race or racism impacted you personally? Is this a Bob Big Boy story?
Actually, it's not Bob's Big Boy. Was it Bob's Big Boy? It's Bob's Big Boy, not Bob
Bob
Evans. Well, when I was in high school, when we graduated, we wanted to go to Bob's Big Boy. It was a nice little restaurant, you know, and that might have been like one of our after graduation activities, and we all, it must have been about maybe 4 to 6, it had to be about 6 of us. We went in the restaurant, they let us sit there like they were going to serve us, and nobody ever came. We were there a long time, and so that was around that time when people were protesting and stuff like that. I don't know if they thought we were protesting. We just wanted a meal, you know, and they wouldn't serve us. Now that was my experience with Bob's Big Boy.
Like a food
By the
poisoning.
time she got older, it was a little bit, you know, they really were much nicer. I'm trying to think if I had any other experiences here in East Cleveland. I can't think of any right now.
More generally, has race in your memories, has race or racism impacted you in any way? Or how so?
Of course it has, because I'm black. And oh gosh, I my memory is a little bit short right now. Employment for me was never a problem. So I didn't have a whole lot of racism there. If it was going over my head, but I was always allowed to do my job. I had one experience. I remember someone they didn't want me in the room because I was black. And
But yet she had all the information he needed.
actually I was going to be helping him, you know. But when the head anesthesiologist, who was like kind of over the center, found that out, she was very upset about that. And she was Jewish, and I'm kind of thinking that there was sort of a relationship with her identifying with me. But anyway, she said that if that got reported, they could shut them down because of that, because they were allowing discrimination in their employment. They were not supposed to stop me from doing my job. But she was very upset about that. Plus, she didn't like the way I felt. I felt like, you know, how could this man do this, say this, and I'm there to help him, you know.
Was this a patient?
Was a patient,
okay.
yeah. Didn't want me in the room because I was black. I think when he was being in the intake area, and he told them that he didn't want any black people in his room. So I had set it up, but then they told me I couldn't work in the room. So I waited until his case was over, and I went back to my job. But then I heard the doctor talking about how that they're not allowed to do that. She said she would have canceled the case if she had known he said that, but nobody brought that issue to her. She said, I would have canceled the case. So I felt that was fairness in my job there, but, you know, people are die-hard racist. So.
What about for you, Ndeda?
What's the question?
How has race or racism impacted you personally?
You know, I go back to I was reared to believe that I'm just as good as anyone else.
What did I used to tell you?
What did you used to tell me? What did you used to tell me? Oh,
They use the toilet the
hey,
same
Mom.
way.
Mom. When I said, oh, I remembered,
Well,
right?
See, now you
Okay.
asked me.
Let's save some stuff, okay?
Just say some stuff.
Just a little bit. Well, pretty much that was the attitude. So we never used the N-word. I'd never heard that in my house, out of my mom's mouth, out of my grandmother's house. It just did not resonate in our being. I remember growing up watching, you know, Martin Luther King films. We had Emma. I read Malcolm X for the first time when I was in college. Was always proud to be, but not racist. You know, my mom reared me to have respect for people. You know, the first time that I was called the N-word was when I went off to college. That I remember. Mm-hmm. And it was on a weekend. It was on a campus on a weekend, and I'm walking, maybe to the mess hall or wherever I was walking to. But nonetheless, a little girl comes up to me, and she's a young white girl. And she may have been maybe 5, 6 years old, and she's on her tricycle. She rides up to me and calls me in. And I'm sort of kind of approaching her because I'm thinking, you know, she's a little girl riding up to me. Maybe she needs some help. Well, that certainly set me aback a bit. Because, you know, here I am, certainly on the other side of the river, but in this, you know, neighborhood that's so quaint, and you can walk up to the professors' homes and, you know, have dinner with them and talk about whatever. And here's this professor's kid riding up to me on her tricycle. She learned it from someplace. And that, for me, and I you know, the experience with the water fountain must have been so traumatic mm-hmm. that I just have absolutely no recollection of that. But I do remember the little girl on her tricycle. Always have been conscious that I'm usually the few or the only one of me in a room.
I used to tell her, I said, you are going to always be maybe one or in a group. So you might as well get used to it. But she never had a problem with it. No?
My friends are very diverse. It's nothing like people are inviting you over to the house for dinner. You know, I've done that without any problems. I haven't done that here, only because we are not entertaining type family. I usually go outside mm-hmm. and entertain. Mm-hmm. And also, we have so much going on at home, and I want to be respectful of my home and my mother having her peace. There have been some environments where I felt civility underneath the surface of conversations. I think I felt it more so when I was had my first consulting job, and my hair was this short, and I couldn't understand why people were reacting to me in a certain way. And I'm rocking my do, you know. I didn't have much hair, so I'm rocking what I had, and I'm confident and proud about it. But I felt different forces at play, not only in some of the conversations that we were having. It was just civility underneath the surface. It's just something. But it was for me, it was quite obvious that the pictures on the walls weren't reflective of me. They weren't about me. They weren't for me. Um, and I felt different, not less than, but there wasn't a belonging feeling. It wasn't necessarily a welcoming environment. One of my first jobs. As long as I performed, I was well.
How do you think race or racism has impacted the city of East Cleveland?
How has race or racism?
Impacted the city of East Cleveland?
Well, this isn't utopia. So let's be real about that. I think it's easy with insufficient engagement of people who were living in East Cleveland when redlining and Blockbuster began. I think that, this whole fear of living near or with people who look different than themselves really caused the city to flip quite quickly. And without having, like I said, block clubs in play and things of the like, and people were really holding their elected officials accountable and being engaged in the process, when more African Americans who were, quite frankly, this is my belief, looking for better opportunities for their children, go to better schools, live in better, decent, safe environments. When more people who looked like me moved into the city, more people who didn't look like me moved out. And I just believe that there was a lot of fear. So over time, we became feared. And if you did not look like me, you were fearful. And who wants to exist in fear? And I just believe that there were a lot of good people, white people who lived here.
I always felt that when they move out, they create the area. It's kind of a vicious cycle, because most people want to elevate themselves. They want to get a good job, they want to make money, they want to live in a nice house. It's the whole reason why my mother always moved, because she always wanted to be in a better area. And so when you get into that area and then you see people who have those means move out, they sort of create the ghetto-ish type areas, because there are people who are moving in, they're renting, or they become landlords and they move out of their houses and they rent to people who don't really care that much. It's like that vicious cycle. So it's almost as though that fear makes them move, and so that once they move, they create this environment.
And there's a lot of association with that.
Mm-hmm.
Here you have a bunch of black people, and there's corruption,
Mm-hmm.
and there's crime, then they must be the cause of it.
Yeah.
And that's ignorant. Which is why I always feel like when people talk about East Cleveland, do they really know?
They don't really know, because even at work, when they say, "Where do you live?" I said, "East Cleveland." Oh, it's like you're in the belly of the beast.
You need to move. You need to move fast.
Right.
I've been told to move. I've been told to move by some very well-intended people that I've worked with, not in recent years, but very well-intended people. And they also come from an era when, and some of them were affluent people too. And they also were raised in a different era with different experiences. But, you know, I just feel like I really feel like my generation was supposed to be the generation where that has just become, and that's my utopia, that's just become non-existent, you know, fearing other people, you know, just because they're different than you are. They have a dialect that's, you know, you haven't heard before, or they live in East Cleveland. Yeah.
I've noticed that, and I'm thinking it's because economics that Neela Park, you know, for years and years and years, as long as I can remember, they used to have these glorious light exhibitions for that park. I mean, you could drive all up in there and see it. And then in the last, I'd say 10 years or so.
It's been more than that.
It's been more than that, but
every year it's less and less and less.
The display gets less and less and less. So it's almost like, why even go around the corner and look at it, you know? People used to drive from all over just to come and see that display.
You know, I've when I was unemployed, I remember trying to find a job and using my first name and my city, I would never get any hits. I use the N is for Nicole, so I always use 3 initials. So I became in Nicole Letson, and I lived in Cleveland. Got a lot more hits, or I began to receive some interest.
That's funny because I remember seeing a documentary about that. I think it was either a documentary or it was a little blip on the TV about black people who had African names. As soon as they see that that application, okay, it's in a separate file. And so when I saw that, I was hoping that you would never have to go through that.
Yeah,
because
that's my name, so I kept it.
You're right.
But at that point, if that anecdote is any true reflection of reality, then so be it.
Mm-hmm. But at that time, that was the pride, you know. And I wanted her to have an African name, and that's what she was going to have.
But she pronounced it with a very American flair.
Did well, that's what I thought. I thought it was supposed to be that way.
That's what I tell people to call me.
Mm-hmm. But yeah.
Following up on what you all have been talking about, how has inequality impacted you personally? You've been talking a little bit about race and racism, but that and other forms of inequality, how have you experienced it, if at all? Whether it's economic, gender, whatever it is.
I think I experienced it at work too once, because I remember, and it was kind of in the early time of my employment where I retired from. They always, when they first opened up, they hired a lot of people, and then in a few months they weren't getting the patient numbers that they wanted, so they were breaking people's hours down, and the doctor that hired me realized that I was a single mother, and when we had our meeting, he said that I realized, you know, your economic situation, we're not going to change your hours at all. So, but after a few years, I remember as they were doing bonuses and raises, the directors changed, and I remember this one doctor, they'd had a meeting about our raises, and so he came to me and he said, "Are you happy with your raise?" I said, yes. He said, are you happy with your raise? Because he was trying to tell me that I wasn't getting what I really deserved. And so I said, no. He said, well, that can be fixed. That I found pretty unfair.
When was that?
Pardon me?
When was that?
That was probably, it was in the mid 80s because I started there, well, probably in the later 80s because I started there in 84. So I would say around 1988, 89. So,
Did
yeah.
anyone treat you differently or have perceptions of you based on the fact that you were a single parent? A single mother with a child living in East Cleveland?
No, I never felt that. Never felt that. And I was always the only black nurse at that facility. But no. Once everybody got to know me, you know how they treated me. They always took very good care of me. They were very nice. I had a lot of respect. I felt that I had a lot of respect. I do remember the lady she was like director over the nursing, and I remember her saying something, and I thought, why is she saying that? She says, people put things on their applications, and it's really never ever really true. And I was like, it kind of went over my head, but I think she was talking about me. But everything that I put on my application was true. I think she just didn't want to believe that I worked in these different places. I mean, she used to put me in the worst cases, the hardest cases, and because all I did was, I was like the OR tech. I had to do all the scut work but she didn't realize that my fortitude was, I'm going to get this, they're going to like me. And it's funny because all the doctors used to ask for me to be in their rooms, and I just loved what I did. But I guess she thought that was going to break me, but it never did. And she was gone before I was. But yeah, that I did feel some racism there.
What about you, David? How has inequality impacted you personally?
Inequality.
Inequality.
What do you mean by that?
It could be based on economics. It could be based on gender. It could be based on where you live. It could be based on whatever forms of inequality in any way, in addition to racism, which is a form of inequality, right?
Sure.
So any other forms of inequality has have you been impacted personally? Anything you can remember? Where you were treated differently, not for good reason.
Sure.
Or for good reason.
Well, if I was treated different for good reason, that's because they knew I was special. Well,
Could be because they perceived you as different. Could be based on perception.
well,
What about that one consulting firm that you worked for?
don't mention the name.
I'm not. You know
the
what?
same one when you wore your hair short.
Yeah, it was the same one.
Doing their thing.
Yeah.
I always felt that they appreciated her look, because she looked like a beautiful black businesswoman. And I used to tell her, when they talk to you, they have no choice but to look directly in your eyes and, connect with you. And she said, I don't think you wanted to hear that. But that's what I felt, because she's smart. She knew what she was doing, and there was nothing else for them to focus on, You never saw it that way, huh?
But I didn't feel You know, perhaps I just wasn't aware of it. I'm conscious to know that those things exist, and that I have not, in my near 40 years, have been immune to it being those type of barbs being thrown at me. I just think that specific instances, I wasn't aware that it was happening. Because I was just always trying to focus on to be the best person that I could be. Always concerned about, making my mother proud. Because I've seen her sacrifices, my grandmother's sacrifices, up close and personal. So whatever that was or may have been, I wasn't going to dignify it by, either addressing it head on. I'm just going to rise above it and keep on moving. I also know that, some people who knew me then and know me now just can't believe I'm the same person. Because I think I was more quiet, more reserved. I observed a lot. I think that I've changed a great deal. I'm always engaging with people that I've always known and I've always been around and who know me. And so perhaps in those environments, maybe when I was experiencing things that I could not understand because I was different than them, and I didn't want to give credibility to how different they thought that I might have been, I was just more reserved in my dealings. But most places where I've worked, people they've liked me. And these are people who did not look like me. And I've often had opportunities and invitations from them to me to do things that I wasn't getting elsewhere. And I'm perhaps because there wasn't elsewhere for me. I guess I'm just not aware of any specific unequalness, but I'm not stupid to believe that it had not existed. I think actually, quite frankly, I think if there was any unequalness, it may have been when I was laid off. Certainly working at will, but someone who I trusted a great deal there said, well, always, just like this gentleman walked up to you and asked you, are you happy with your, someone to this day, I remember that she asked me, are you satisfied with your severance? Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah. All this money at one time. But the way in which she continued to ask me, and I don't, because I don't know and I only suspect, I'm not sure how much different that severance would have been. And if there was a difference, I can't say whether it was because I am a woman, I'm Black, I live in East Cleveland, I live in inner city. I didn't go to Ivy League school, I don't have a trust fund, the property that I own, I'm living in it. I can't say whether it was because of any of those things, any of those or all of those. I don't know, but if there was any unequal opportunity, if there was any unequal regard for me, perhaps that was it.
How do you think inequality has impacted East Cleveland?
Mm-hmm.
You talked about race and racism.
Sure.
How do you think inequality has
Wow. Yeah, I've traveled a great deal, and I often wonder why does I've seen neighborhoods, I've seen areas across the country that look like East Cleveland, and then I've seen some areas that don't look like East Cleveland, and there are nothing but black people living there, or the majority of. Um,
You know, I don't know if this has
hmm.
anything to do with the question, but when Huron Road was closed, that just did not make any sense to me. This community here had a hospital that serviced it, and for them to close that down, I mean, I know there's this um, business situation between the large hospitals like Cleveland Clinic and University hospitals, but that was a community hospital and it closed it. I mean, tore it down, didn't waste any time, and those were people's jobs. And it seemed to me that there was a lot of black influence in that hospital um, towards the end of its viability. You know, it just, why did it have to happen like that?
Census were down. Doctors didn't want to go there. There
Yeah.
wasn't
Oh,
enough
yeah.
work
That is true. A
there.
lot of
You
the
didn't
doctors
want.
they didn't want to go there.
You didn't want to go there.
Well, I had experience being when I was trained there. That was one of the reasons why I didn't want to go there. But
What was that experience?
well, um,
Mm.
my experience, well, that was in the early days. Um, as a student, I saw a lot of stuff that went on in the hospital that I did not like, and I didn't want to be subjected to it. There was this word called staff. Staff patients basically meant that you were poor and mostly black. The doctors didn't really want to take care of them, you know, and so I didn't want to be exposed to that. So that was one of my reasons why I didn't want to go there at that time. It had nothing to do with the 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 situation, the black doctors or anything like that. It just, because if it, anything, it had more to do with the white doctors because they were the ones who had this I won't say animosity, but this whole
Those that you worked with.
idea of staff patients were poor. Um, they were basically getting free care, you know, or something like that on Medicaid or whatever, you know. I hated hearing that type of conversation.
So you didn't want to go there in terms of use the facilities because you were afraid you would be treated as a staff patient?
Well, I probably wouldn't have been treated as a staff patient because I had insurance, but the fact that I had worked among people who were like that, you know, it's always in the back of their mind that, you know, you're poor, you're black, staff patients.
So the whole time you lived in East Cleveland, Huron Road Hospital has not been a hospital that you've gone to get
I did go there
from?
once, and it was an emergency thing. That time that I got sick, I really didn't want to go there because all of my records was at University Hospitals. That's the reason why I had you drive me there. That was just before they closed it down. Just before they closed it down, and I asked the emergency team, "Can you take me to University Hospitals?" And he said, "Well, ma'am, we can't pass a hospital and take you to another hospital. We have to take you to Huron Road." Well, they didn't have any of my records there, and I was afraid that I would get the because they wouldn't really know me and have that access to everything that involved my health care. That was the reason why I didn't want to go then. So it had nothing to do. I really needed to go to University Hospitals because all my doctors were there, all of my records in the system there. So, and then the following year it was closed, tore down. So then when I got sick this last time, they took me directly to University Hospital. But yeah, seeing businesses closed like that, um, you know, there's not a business here in the East Cleveland that can support the community too with the taxes and stuff like that. And I'm not sure what's helping us.
One of the things we haven't talked much about is politics.
Mm-hmm.
The questions around politics and elected officials and over the generations, over the years. Do you all think politics or I know Ndeda, you mentioned corruption, has played a role in the affairs or state of East Cleveland? What's your thought on that?
Sure. You know, I just want to believe that anyone who comes into those offices, they're not bad people. They're good people, and they want to do well. I also believe that oftentimes the enormity of the city's needs is sometimes pressing. It's very burdensome, and in order to serve, sometimes process, procedures, or what may have been legitimate in a resourced community, legitimate processes weren't followed. And then not naive to think that there weren't some elected officials who knew darn well there was an infrastructure in place to watch them, and so they did whatever they liked, and their intentions were very selfish. Their motives were very selfish, and instead of being rightful public servants, they were corrupt representatives. And I think, you know, after several generations of that, that's become newsworthy, and so that's what people see when they think of East Cleveland.
Yeah, I've heard people at work say, "There you go again. That's East Cleveland."
And that's also has
about the politics part.
deterred very well capable people from stepping forward and getting involved. Oftentimes it seemed like there were more bad forces at the helm than good forces.
And that's only what people remember.
Yeah.
Did you follow the different administrations? Were you politically engaged in any way?
I never really followed them. I would just wind up hearing about how, not that I didn't vote, because that's my heart there. I will vote. But I was always surprised when I found out that any particular person that was in charge was corrupt.
Disappointing.
Disappointing, yeah. It was very disappointing, because you would think that they're there to help the people of the community and not be helping themselves. So yeah, that was very disappointing to hear about some of the earlier mayors that got in that area. And I think when I was a kid there was a white mayor, and I can't remember who that was. But yeah.
Can you recollect a memory or an instance when the community fought for something?
Fought for something?
Yeah. Fought for something they wanted to see happen in community, or fought against something that they didn't want to see happen in community, but just kind of rallied.
No, I can't. Doesn't mean that it wasn't happening.
Particular campaigns or activism, anything like that?
The only thing, well, see, this is so recent though. I just remember how our present mayor really did not, well, I'm sure that he was probably working out something, but he really didn't want Huron Road to be closed. And um, he made that audible. He, on the news, he spoke up for that. And other than that, I can't think of anything right now. I didn't really start paying attention, which is very sad to say, until Mayor Brewer was in office, and we had regular cable, and so I would watch the community meetings that he would hold, and every Saturday or whenever we could, we would sit and watch that.
And what was that like?
Well, I'll tell you.
Here she go being honest again.
Very outspoken people wouldn't not just going to go along with anything people say to them. I enjoyed it, and I always intended to go to a meeting, but I never did because I was just so tired. I have a lot of health issues that bring that about, so I never attended that. Now that we have a different type of, we have satellite instead of cable, I miss those meetings because I'm sure, but I do get calls, a robocall from our mayor, Gary, that when that meeting is going to be, but I haven't been able to go to one. Yeah, they never let, they let the community let their presence be known in those meetings.
Parts of the community.
What do you mean?
Parts of the community,
Mm-hmm.
not all parts. Well, first of all, I as painful as some of those community meetings were to watch, I appreciated seeing them, having access to them, and I may have gone to
And
a couple.
access to the council meetings too.
Access to the
Yeah.
council meetings, not only from the administration, but also the council meetings. Often painful because I just think that whereas some of our representatives are very well-intending people and compassionate people, and they believe in the community, some of their tactics are more detrimental or harmful. Maybe it's their style of governing. Maybe it's how they were taught. Maybe it's the era that they grew up in. Maybe combative policy, activism was what they knew and how they were trained, and they believe that that's how to move a process forward. I think that because of my experiences in different exposures, I believe advocacy is better. And so, seeing some of the, whether it was from the previous mayor or, with the current administration and the current council, some of the back and forth is quite disparaging because that's being recorded and that's what's being portrayed about the city. And so that is what resonates in people's minds who don't know about the real heart and soul here, and that there are good people here. There are people who, if you drive up any one of these streets in this city, you'll find at least one homeowner who's doing the best that they can with the resources that they have, whether it's a pot or flower on the porch, whether it's a new handrail, whether it's a new screen, there are many people who live here and who are also renters, and they call
care.
this home, and they care. But that isn't portrayed on our cable television. More of it should be. And maybe it's also, you know, where we are as society that, you know, negativism is entertaining. And so when I saw, because we don't have the old form of cable anymore, that level of discourse by people who are supposed to be representing me, and they're not reflecting any notion of me or how I portray myself or what my brand is, it's embarrassing. You know, it's repelling. And I have to think that while I haven't any aspirations, I suppose that there are people who would come forward or would like to come forward, who want to be more engaged, to do better and do the right thing for, you know, the place that they're raising their children, or they're taking care of their grandmother, you know, or they may just work. But sometimes those negative forces that are being projected about our city are quite overwhelming for anyone.
And you would think this an all black community, but it's not. There are some affluent type homes in East Cleveland on the fringe that are owned by white people, but
And owned by black people.
But I'm just saying that there's no representation of them at those. Well, there wasn't when I was a kid. One lady that I remember.
Well, who wants to go to a party of mess?
Yeah,
I mean, seriously, let's be real about that.
that's true.
That is not how I want to spend my time.
Yeah. But you wonder if what kind of activity that they have in the city. Probably just as much as I have. What can I say?
You know, one thing that it's quite interesting that you can enter the city and leave the city without even going into the heart of the city. There's so many back doors that are, quite frankly, the front doors for many people who live here.
I don't understand. What do you mean by that?
Well, if my travel patterns didn't take me downtown, I would never go through that side of the city. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't have a reason to. I would just go up Noble Road or somewhere else. And I suppose that a lot of people who live, who are mobile, who have their own means of transportation or otherwise, or are on transit that goes south, you don't necessarily have to drive down Euclid Avenue or on Hayden Avenue or up Woolworth.
Right. Okay, I get it now. Yeah, you're right.
To come in and out of the city.
Yeah, because I have had, I've heard conversations when I worked about people who actually worked at Huron Road Hospital, and they have such an easy access to the traveling to the hospital, but they didn't have to go anywhere else in the city. Yeah, I understand what you're saying now, and yeah, you're right. They didn't have to go anywhere else, and if they just went to the hospital, they check on back up into the suburbs.
In and out.
Yeah. Except for this one doctor that I had, he asked me if I could fix a ticket. He was teasing.
Should we turn this off?
No, he was teasing me because we had that at certain times during the
traffic
day,
cameras, yeah.
The traffic cameras. He was getting a bunch of those, and you know what? I know there was a lot of controversy about whether they should have those cameras or not, but that was a revenue for us. I mean, people would say you can't drive through East Cleveland if you don't keep the speed limit. Same as any other suburb. I enjoyed that.
Well, you know what?
I mean, I didn't like getting that one ticket, but I never got another one. Tell you that. But
yeah, I've paid a house note with those tickets. I have
But-
paid a house note with
but-
those tickets.
I mean, like, I appreciated that particular revenue for this city because the hospital is gone. We don't have any other factories or anything else in the city, you know. So hey, we have to get our money too, just like a lot of other people.
Well, you know, why should East Cleveland be a place where speeding is okay
Yeah.
to begin with,
Especially past schools
or on my street?
or on my street. Yeah.
You know, why is, you know,
Why is it okay?
why, right? So what? You have to pay a ticket. If it was a cop should pull you over. You know, what's the big deal?
Now you just get a nice little photo in the mail. But now when I drive down Noble, I notice the traffic pattern is a whole lot safer when they go down, when they don't have that construction. People do slow down. They slow down on those main streets like Noble, Taylor, Fair Hill, Superior. They slow down, which is good.
Today you said, you know, why should people want to go to, you know, see a powder mess or be involved in a meeting that's out of control or disparaging? Do you think if more people were involved, more people went of different, you say some people go, some voices are heard, that would make a difference?
Well, I think
What's a potential antidote?
as an antidote, yeah, because, you know, I haven't done any studies on this. Well, I think there's a natural tendency for some people to gravitate to organized affairs, whether it's a political event, whether it's, you know, a social event. If it's organized, people feel comfortable, they know what's going on. There's opportunities for them to be engaged. There's healthy dialogue. There's healthy conflict. Sometimes progress doesn't happen without healthy conflict. But I think that I think people who are susceptible to that have been exposed to that, who are open to that. I think that I can only speak for myself. That's what I know. And at the same time, I could still see substance in other styles of organizing. But when it's not progressive, it's disengaging. And I often see very disengaging style of politics by some of our representatives who are elected. And the perplexing thing to me is that they continue to be elected. And I have to think that those who are engaged in the process, that's what they know. So they feel as if they are being fairly represented. They are being vigorously represented. And I don't see a lot of diversity in that voting bloc. But I do see a lot of people who have been here for a very long time. And there are many of the same people who, if you drive up and down any one of these streets, you'll see that they're doing the best that they can with their property, with the resources that they have.
Do you think that style of politics, as you describe it, continues because people are not more engaged? People are not holding elected officials accountable?
So you're going to ask me the same question in a different way? Yeah. So this might be part of the call to action that you're getting to. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Piggybacking
off of that, how do you think surrounding institutions and cities have impacted East Cleveland? Surrounding institutions or cities, and maybe this is also a space for you to talk about some of the work that you've done as well, been involved in.
How has surrounding cities impacted East Cleveland?
Or institutions.
Or institutions.
So,
You know, any edge city that has minimal resources, any edge community that has minimal resources aren't necessarily, top in mind of presence for reinvestment of any kind. But for, you know, a very clear plan on what the city's potential is and what it can become, and what people would like for their neighborhoods to be. You know, it's often looked over. Investment, rather. I've, from my perspective, I think that has been to the city's detriment for a very long time. You know, it's often the back door. You know, there's a lot of opportunity here. And I think that people who've lived here quite some time, they know it. From my perspective, it's saying, and so what? So what are you going to do with this moment? You know, what are you going to, are you going to invite those resources here? Or are we going to be welcoming to change? Change that's different than, you know, change is different. Sometimes change is good. Yeah, I like the fact that what may have been part of the imaginary boundary that kept me on Case's campus, there are more people and speaking not only about, it exists, in many minds it still exists, but by the mere fact of millions of dollars being invested on the western gateway of this city. From my perspective, it's an indication that the future could be brighter.
Can you talk specifically about some of those projects or investment that you're talking about and what role you have played in it?
Sure.
Be modest.
Well, I'm not going to take more credit for it either. So when I think about the western gateway of East Cleveland, I think about Euclid Avenue, and I think about the certainly there is a great deal of abandonment on that side of our Euclid corridor, which presents an opportunity for redevelopment. And because it's a CRA, Community Reinvestment Area, designated area by the city, there's tax abatements available. There are incentives to come into the city. And also with several rounds of federal funding to stabilize neighborhoods, the city has done, I think, quite well targeting very scarce resources to change the perception of the physical landscape of the city and how it's messaging itself. So with that, at least those first four or five streets into the city from our western gateway, not many years ago, maybe about 4 or 5 years ago, we began looking at, when I say we, me and when I was with my former employer, UCI, received an invitation from a housing developer, nonprofit housing developer, to be a part of assisting the previous administration with capitalizing upon that asset, the availability of land, the opportunity for increasing residential inventory for people who wanted and want to live, work, and play near University Circle. So the time appeared to be right. And so I was a part of inventorying properties and also working with architects and planners and the previous nonprofit housing developer and conceptualizing what that might look like across those first 4 streets. And it's interesting, the more people, some forces have been waiting for this type of expansion for many, many, many years, and oftentimes some people with monetary resources have done what they've been doing for many years, and that's speculating. So there was a great deal of speculating that began to occur along those streets as well. And the name, University Circle, there's this huge notion that, its institutions have a whole lot of money, and so this is a payday. So people began buying up properties and squatting on them. And for whatever reason, we didn't proceed, and I think a lot of it had to do with timing and resources and consensus with the administration, and quite frankly, because assemblage would have taken a lot of years for the type of assemblage to come to fruition for that particular type of plan, where folks who are living there would have an opportunity with some level of resources to either stay in the city, be relocated, or go elsewhere, which for some people that's, a nice option. So fast forward, my previous employer owned a plot of land on the north, we'll call it the north side of Euclid. It just seemed right to put that in play without a great deal of assemblage necessary. And current administration thought very wisely to target its very limited NSP funds and townhome development or rental development. First phase was built, and with a very credible developer that understands and very sensitive to urban development. He's done it a great deal before. Had become friends with the administration. Is also very well known and respected by our county officials. He's proven. And with that partnership, which is actually right about the time that I progressed into my next leg of my journey, built what's there today, and still with the realization that people want to live near fascinating, vibrant community. And by developing this particular project on, east of the bridge has, at least from my perspective, created an indication that the future could be brighter for the city of East Cleveland.
What about the reimagined homes? Can you talk a little bit about those? I know there was one that just opened, and there was a groundbreaking that both you and I just attended. Was that also a part of some of the work that you were involved in?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, Reimagine East Cleveland is a initiative, a housing initiative by the current administration. Also, again, leveraging its NSP dollars to renovate homes, put them back online at an affordable price point for persons who are capable, financially capable and willing and desire to live in the city. So the role that I play there is not only because of the type of work I do in community development banking, sponsoring. Thus far, we have very zealously sponsored the homeowners workshop. We hope to do more should that opportunity come to fruition. If people who are credit worthy go through this class and they want to do business with the bank that I work for, there's an opportunity for them there.
What is your thought on this kind of redevelopment and investment happening without the threat of, or in the face of potential gentrification of an urban neighborhood in terms of displacement, in terms of not providing the benefits for those who live there to actually access the resources, incoming resources, you know, the whole threat of gentrification that has happened decades and decades and decades again, just generally, when we look at urban communities and in particular low-income and African-American communities.
Ask me your question again.
What do you think about this kind of redevelopment and reinvestment in terms of the threat of gentrification and how the process is proceeding in East Cleveland? You know, there's a fear.
Sure. I think that those let's acknowledge the fear, and let's not be dismissive of it, and let's involve those who have those concerns in a process that's transparent and where there's dialogue. And you know, to the extent that there are existing stakeholders, also voting stakeholders who exist here, are a part of that, who have that perspective, as well as others who have different perspectives. You know, my desire is that that fear could be dispelled, you know, because from what I know, certainly gentrification does lead to wholesale displacement, but I don't believe that's what's happening here. You know, we've held on to this home because we want to be here. And so we continue to invest in our property, and we're encouraged to do more, certainly when we have more resources to do it, well, others are. And so, you know, what's happening there is way on the other side of the city, but it's encouraging for me here, because I feel as if that at some point will mean that someone's going to come in and help me pay my taxes. You know, and the services that I believe that we are deserving of as homeowners, and our taxes are paid up, then someday we'll actually begin to receive them. Whether it's calling the police, and they always come, we haven't had that problem in many years, or having our potholes filled, you know, or our light poles fixed or changed out, or having crossing guards. The city needs more resources, period. And it needs more financial resources, be it income taxes or real estate taxes. And the only way that's going to happen is if more people with means move here. And if there is this type of dialogue, and it is a managed dialogue, and we agree on what we believe the outcome should be, if it's a mixed income community, well, let's ensure that we have mixed stakeholders a part of the process and invested in it. So I don't see it as gentrification. I see it as revitalization. You know, I want to not have to spend a tank of gas to go on to the other side of Greater Cleveland to an ice cream parlor. I don't think that I should have to do that. If I don't want to, if I want to, that's cool too. You know? Or cleaners that I think will be, you know, sensitive to my clothes. You know. We have a Save-A-Lot up the street, and I'm glad for it. And I think that prices are right and the food quality is fair, it's good. But I would like to have more options. You know, I like rotisserie chicken. I shouldn't have to drive 3 or 4 communities over to get it. There's some fresh produce here. It's limited, but it's good, and I'm grateful for it, particularly for people who aren't as mobile as myself. My grandmother used to walk up the street all the time. But I think that with more residents, more rooftop, will come more retail, and with residents with resources, economic resources, the amenities the amenities will continue to become that much more diverse and can improve and be available to a variety of people.
And how do you protect the people who are in community already who don't have as many resources when people with more resources come in?
Mm-hmm. I think that you have to provide them a voice. And oftentimes you have to provide a voice for people who don't know that their voice is not being heard or missed. We have to be conscious about it. You know, I don't see bulldozers coming up Euclid Avenue. So there's a level of consciousness there, at least from my perspective. I also think that some of the cantankerousnism, or if that's such a word, I know you didn't pay for all that education for me to start making up words, but
You can make a word up if you want to. I paid for it.
you paid for it, so I can make up words. See, there's always a couple sides to a story. Whereas oftentimes it's difficult to get past the delivery of that, you have to acknowledge. You have to acknowledge their stories. You know, you have to respect what they've experienced, what their collective memories are. As hard as that is, you know, and in a way that is respectful, it incorporates the best of what they have to offer, as anyone has to offer in a process. You have to keep moving forward.
So you have begun talking about this already. The next question I want to ask is, what is your vision for East Cleveland, for future East Cleveland?
Wow.
And telling me your vision, talk about some of the major issues that you think need addressing, or some of the major things you would like to see to better the city and the community.
So I started talking about that, didn't I? It was kind of becoming vivid. I was seeing it. I would love for more people with various levels of resources to live here. I think that there's opportunity for that to occur, even based on some of the existing housing stock that's available and can be rehabbed, brought back online. I'd love to see more of the cultural institutions that we have in East Cleveland utilized. We have a community theater.
Yeah, beautiful library. I mean, my goodness, the things that they do there.
I think our park is excellent. Now, who has a duck pond these days? We have a duck pond, and a ski hill, small ski hill, sled hill. You never did take me sledding, by the way.
Well, yeah, you did have a board, but I'm sorry about that.
Well, that's okay. So I would love to see, you know, more activities in our parks, not just for, you know, a festive weekend, but more utilization of our park systems. It's quite beautiful. You know, I would, you know, the fact that our band went to China has done an amazing thing for parts of the city's image.
Yeah, they put us on the map.
You know, how does the district capitalize that? And I suspect that perhaps some of that leveraging that creativity has begun. But, you know, I would love for East Cleveland school system to be known, you know, widely known for not only graduating smart kids, but kids who are excellent in whatever arts, you know. That's what I would like for our youth to be known by, you know, or for. I'd like to see more people walking. The first time that I walked down Idlewood was at the groundbreaking. And man, those homes are just amazing. You know, it felt like a street. It felt like a neighborhood. I just felt as if I was living someone else's memories and seeing because of the potential there. You know, I want to see more people walking and enjoying their community in addition to seeing more people. And there are parts of the city that will probably, and for very good reasons, never be repopulated at the densities that there were. And that's not just an East Cleveland issue. I mean, that's a Midwest issue. That's an Ohio issue. You know, it really would be nice if the world's first industrial park was active and vibrant again. You know, that we could say East Cleveland is home to, you know, General Electric, and it employs 5,000 people. You know, and that its beautiful park, which is actually at the end of the street, is open to residents year round. You know, for picnics and tennis, and they have a couple ball courts out there. It's been so long.
So much stuff back there with
Swimming
not
pools
being utilized. Yeah, it would be nice if
I
we,
would
like, had a swimming pool.
want it to be desirable.
Yeah.
You know, I want it to be desirable. It, you know, I was traveling this weekend on the East Coast, and I loved being in the city where I was. I was so glad to leave. It was so expensive. And I was thinking, man, I got a mansion at home. And I can afford to live in it. You know? Mm-hmm. Got a little plot of land and a mansion.
Yeah, that's my mansion. Huh?
3 stories.
Mm-hmm.
But desirable. A place where people want to be, they want to live, they want to work, they want to send their kids to school. Their churches are here. You know, would love. I haven't done any statistics, so just, you know, I think it's probably safe to say that a number of our churches have congregants predominantly who do not reside in the city, and that certainly is just a microcosm of what happens across, you know, any other urban environment. But it'd be nice to see people walking to church or to whatever house of worship that they want to matriculate. It'd be nice to see that. It sure would feel a lot safer and warmer, you know?
So we stopped on,
You were asking me
right,
what
your
was my
future.
vision.
Yeah, your vision for
I would like to see some of those empty lots, like Bob's Big Boy, some sort of business that would bring revenue, taxes, money into the community. Something like that, because we've lost so much along the way in the past few years. We do have some pretty good resources. Like, I mean, it just reminded me of the library, and I'm not sure if they still do it, but on Sundays they would have the free jazz sessions there. I mean, and it's a wonderful library, and the theater. But if we could have, I just would like to see something large come into the community to make East Cleveland's name stand out again.
that will put a smile on your face.
Put a smile on your
Put a big
face.
smile on your face. It's
And
like
a lot
right
of,
now, if you're thinking, what would make
right,
you smile?
and a lot of people would be coming into the community to spend money. Come to our community to spend money. I'd like to see the neighborhoods that need help get it.
And what would you be prepared to do to participate in making East Cleveland better?
Well, right now, because of my health, I'm not able to really do anything. Because I used to be very active in my church, and I'm not even able to get back to those things that I was doing. I'm just, I'm not a type of person that can canvass the area. If I have monetary resources to give small amounts, I would do that. And right now I can't think of anything else.
What about you, Ndeda? What would you be prepared to do to participate in making East Cleveland better? And how does this fit your everybody has a role to play?
Well, because everyone does. I mean, you know, the mere fact that my mom chose to buy a house in East Cleveland and decided to stay in East Cleveland and has pulled her invested her resources not only in her property but in me here in East Cleveland. I mean, she's doing her part. From my perspective, she's doing her part. She's being a good citizen. She's participating in this here, you know. Certainly, I'd love for this for archival purposes, but certainly, you know, my hope is that it will be informative and inspiring to engage people in our community to continue to be involved and become more involved in making things better. You know, I'm learning more about, you know, I travel to different not municipal, but metropolitan statistical areas, and I'm often energized by community building that acknowledges that everyone has a role to play and not everyone's role will be the same. And so if it's either time, effort, or money, contribute something to a cause. Excuse me. So, you know, if it was a block club, my hours are weird. You know, they're very strange. But if I'd be interested in a block club on the street, yeah, I'd host it on my porch. And maybe Mama could make some cookies. And that would be her part. I mean, seriously, that would be her part.
So Grayton doesn't have a block club?
No.
No, it does not.
And never has since I've been on the street.
You know, there's a lot down the street here. And, you know, I actually, the first time, you know, because of the work that we do, you know, I see demolition all the time. But it's nothing like a house being demolished on your street.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's more than a vacant lot. It's more than a lot for me. You know, I remember the kids that grew up there. They had kids.
Yep.
But we loved them, you know.
You loved them.
Well, they were children, you know, so there are memories there. And there's actually good
Yeah.
memories there. There's some bad memories there, but there are good memories there, too. You know, there's a lot of parking on the street. And we live in a two-family, multifamily district. So, yeah, parking is scarce. But it doesn't necessarily have to be, you know, off-street parking. You know, it could be a garden of some sort, whether it's, you know, an edible garden or a sitting garden for the seniors in the neighborhood, or for some of the young children to play. Get them out of the street. It could be something, you know. I'd like to participate in some type of engagement like that. And I suspect that, you know, there has to be, I just believe that there are people in my neighborhood who have the same type of desires, you know, whether it's, you know, a crime watch, you know, maybe it's a grass cutting co-op or snow plowing co-op. Or,
And you can't get that done until you get an organized, like, block
right.
party. Not party, you know what I mean.
And then, I mean, that's what
But you can get those things done that way. I know that.
you know, just like with anyone, when I come home, I want to rest. I want to have peace. I actually like to sleep, although I work very many hours. I like to sleep. But, you know, I think that I am just blessed in the capacity that I actually am I have matched my profession, my occupation with my passion. So the type of work that we're talking about is work that I do in a different way. So I feel as if I am involved in that regard. And certainly East Cleveland is my passion and it's home, but there's a little bit of East Cleveland all over the state of Ohio, you know, and it's a little bit of those places here. And to the extent that actually that time, effort, and money, I actually picked that up in a different community. I was like, oh, absolutely. You know, I hope to bring those good things back home. And my mom mentioned early on that, you know, she didn't have an opportunity to go to college. She was actually very smart. She could have done that. But one thing she always told me is that, you know, I don't know exactly what they're doing over there, but if someone else brings something back, you bring it back too. You bring something back home. So I feel as if by virtue of what I do in a day-to-day role, I can bring things back home. So.
Is there anything that you all would like to say, a message you would like to leave that we haven't asked you? What we'll do is, you know, look at the video, and if there are places where we're like, oh, we should ask that question, you know, we'll get back in touch with you and see if there might be a chance for follow-up. But is there something that you'd like to leave, a message you'd like to leave? If someone opens this 1 month from now, 2 months, 5 months, 6 months, a year, 20 years, what
Time capsule moment, huh?
It's a time capsule
from
moment.
the most short term to when we're looking at it a few days from now to the long term, you know, what message would you like to leave, or words would you like to leave if you haven't had an opportunity to say them already?
You looking at me?
That was my mode of operation.
I'm looking at you.
You looking at me?
That's right.
Oh, yeah. Well, I can say that I enjoy living here, and I'm just hoping that the city can come back in a very good way. And just because there's a few that sending a message and a subliminal message out there that East Cleveland is a bad place to, it's not. There are good people who live here who care about their city, and they're doing the best they can with what they have, and eventually it's going to get better. I can see that down the road.
That's my cue, huh?
That's your cue.
Wow. What's the question again? Seriously.
Is there any parting words that you have, words of wisdom, a message you'd like to leave for anyone looking who would, view this video? It could be to young people, it could be to anybody. Anything you want to say that we haven't asked you or you've not had an opportunity to express? Parting message.
Yeah, I
I'm just giving you time.
thank you. I appreciate that. I'm in.
Brandon was saying everybody has a role to play.
We didn't get that on tape, and I thought that was
Oh,
good.
you didn't?
He thought that was profound.
Yeah, that was good. I feel like repeating
Brandy,
that.
would you like to come toward the camera? I suppose the point that I was making is, his mom was, you asked a question about, how would you like to become involved in moving the city in your neighborhood for your community forward? And the point that I was making, actually preempted that, is that everyone has a role to play. And I think I gave the anecdote that if you drive down any street, you'd see that people are doing the best with what the resources that they have, whether it's a flower pot on the porch, or a new handrail, a coat of paint, or even just taking their trash boxes back in the backyard, or setting them out at the right time. We all have in our own way a role to play, and I also think about families being involved with their children in school, particularly those who can. I was fortunate; not everyone could drop off their kids in the morning and pick them up. I had that opportunity, but maybe a couple basketball games, or just reading with their child at home. Asking them about their homework. Where is the homework? Did you get the homework done? People can find their space and be very active in it, because all those little things add up. That makes community. You're welcome.
Brandon, you have any final questions for this round?
No questions. I'm just an aesthetic kind of person. So if you could tell us about these pictures, that would be great.
Why don't you go from right to left?
You want me to
From
hand
right
it
to
to
left.
you? You can put it on film, or
You have to ask them if we can put it on film. It
You
would
wanna
be
put it on
fabulous to
film?
have a shot of
Sure,
some
you
family
can put it on
pictures.
film if you
okay.
like.
I'll hand it to you. That way you can talk about it. This one?
Okay, that one there, yeah. That's funny. This picture here is
Turn to the camera.
my daughter,
That would be me.
my mother,
That's
and
Grandma.
sitting in the front, and my aunt. She's no longer with us, and this is her daughter. And you see that space right here. I was supposed to be in that picture, and I don't know what happened to me that Sunday, but I missed out on getting that picture taken.
I think you had to go to work.
But it's funny how he set everybody so separate that way. But this was our family, and we were living here in East Cleveland at the time. This is my grandfather,
Julie's.
Julius. Yeah, he died before my daughter was a couple of months before my daughter was born.
And did he hail from Cleveland, the Ohio area?
No, he was born in Albany, Georgia, and he migrated up to Cleveland after he married his wife, and he raised all his kids up here. Yeah, he's a sweet man, and we all surrounded him. And when we was living, yeah, like I said, in that one building, so yeah, that I called him Daddy because my mom called him Daddy.
And are your parents originally from Ohio?
Yes, yes.
So, anything else you want to talk about? Any of those other pictures?
No.
No, not really. The other two pictures,
Same people.
same people.
Although I don't know, that's Dionne Warwick over there on the end.
That's me when I
Yeah.
was much younger.
Yeah,
Let's get a shot at that. Dionne Warwick.
yeah. Right. Yeah.
You know, that's funny because when I as a teenager, I had this one picture that I took, and everybody always asked me, was I related to Dionne, and I say no.
Or from the Caribbean or something like that.
Yeah.
You're still beautiful, Mom.
Those were my hot days.
Next to my pigtails.
So,
Thank you so much.
no, you're welcome. Thank you for letting us be a part of it.
No, thank
I
you.
can't wait for 20 years to come and I can just go, oh yeah, I remember when.
You just sort of breathed it into fruition and look
That's
at
right.
Yeah.